Welcome to the Part S channel. Today, we explain Numbers chapter 11 in a clear and simple way, step by step. This chapter actually contains one of the most dramatic, honestly shocking breaking points in all of biblical history. We're going to witness Moses, the exact same great leader who stood up to Pharaoh and split the sea, completely break down, literally begging for his own death. And the catalyst for this monumental crisis? A sudden, intense craving for cucumbers, melons, and meat. It's a really profound, deeply human chapter about the crushing weight of leadership, the hidden danger of nostalgia, and the severe consequences of ungratefulness. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today's step-by-step walkthrough. We'll start with context and the first fire, then we'll examine craving meat and Moses' despair, see how the 70 elders are chosen, look at the quail and consequences, and wrap up with key ideas and a chapter recap. Let's move right along.
Section 1. Context and the first fire.
So we open up verses 1 through 3, right in the thick of the wilderness journey. The people are moving through the desert, and almost immediately this dark, heavy mood settles over the entire camp. The text tells us that the people were complaining about their hardships right in the hearing of the Lord. And while the divine reaction is immediate and it is severe, God hears this murmuring, this speaking of evil, and his anger is kindled. It isn't a slow build either. It's an instant spark. A divine fire from the Lord literally burns among them, consuming the uttermost part or the outskirts of the camp. It's basically a warning shot, a terrifying display of displeasure right at the edges of their community. So panic immediately sets in. The people realize the severity of what they've done, and they cry out, but not directly to God. They cry to Moses. Moses prays to the Lord, and the fire abates. Because of this terrifying event, that specific place gets a name, Taberah. Now, Taberah is Hebrew for burning. It serves as this permanent geographical reminder of the consequences of murmuring. But, as we're about to see, this localized burning was really just a small prelude to a much larger, way more devastating fire of desire that's about to sweep through the whole camp. Now we arrive at verses 4 through 6, and the situation escalates dramatically. The text specifically points out the mixed multitude that was among the Israelites. These were folks who had joined the Israelites back when they left Egypt. And the text says they fell a-lusting. They developed this intense, all-consuming craving. And you know what? This craving is contagious. It spreads like wildfire. The children of Israel also begin to weep on their part, crying out, "Would that we were given flesh to eat." Notice the emotional state here. They aren't just hungry, they are literally weeping. They are throwing a massive camp-wide emotional breakdown over their diet.
Section 2. Craving meat and Moses' despair.
This phase of the chapter reveals a pretty staggering contrast. Think about it. You have a people who have been miraculously liberated from brutal slavery. They are currently being guided by the literal divine presence, and yet their minds and hearts are completely hijacked by physical desires. They've lost all perspective of their spiritual and physical freedom, all because of their stomachs. Look at the specific foods they list in verse 5. They say, "We remember the fish, which we were wont to eat in Egypt for naught, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic." Notice that phrase for naught, meaning for free. I mean, have you ever found yourself complaining about a blessing just because it became routine? They have completely romanticized their brutal enslavement. They are vividly remembering the free garlic, but conveniently forgetting the whips, the forced labor, and the murder of their children. And then in verse 6, they level just the ultimate insult against God's provision. They say, "But now our soul is dried away. There's nothing at all. We have not saved this manna to look to." They are just bored of the miracle. Imagine getting fresh, sweet, miraculous bread delivered directly to your door every single morning and throwing a tantrum because it doesn't taste like garlic. To really underscore how ungrateful this complaint is, the text actually pauses in verses 7 through 9 to simply describe the manna, basically reminding us of what they're actually complaining about. Manna was a daily, miraculous provision. The text describes it as looking like coriander seed with the appearance of bdellium, which is this really cool translucent resin. The people would gather it, grind it in mills, or beat it in mortars, seethe it in pots, and make cakes out of it. And the taste? It tasted like a cake baked with oil. Plus, it arrived gently every single night with the dew. It was pure, it was abundant, and it was perfectly sustaining. Yet, to the weeping Israelites, it was nothing at all, simply because it lacked those strong, pungent flavors of Egypt. But the absolutely crucial point here is how all of this impacts Moses.
In verses 10 through 15, we witness one of the most agonizing leadership crises in the entire text. Moses hears the people weeping, family by family, every man at the door of his tent. The Lord is exceedingly angry, and Moses is deeply displeased. But Moses doesn't just get angry at the people. He turns to God, and he completely breaks down. He says, "Wherefore hast thou dealt ill with thy servant, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me?" He essentially asks, did I conceive all these people? Did I give birth to them, that you tell me to carry them in my bosom like a nursing father? Moses is utterly overwhelmed. He cries out, I am not able to bear all this people myself alone, because it is too heavy for me. And then he hits rock bottom. He begs God, if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, and let me not look upon my wretchedness. The weeping for meat has literally broken the man who broke Pharaoh.
Section 3. The 70 Elders Chosen.
Okay, so God does not punish Moses for his despair. Actually, God answers him with this incredible twofold intervention. First, he provides a profound administrative and spiritual solution to Moses' leadership crisis. And second, he gives a really startling, harsh response to the people's craving for meat. Let's look at how God addresses the structure of leadership first. In verses 16 and 17, God gives Moses a step-by-step plan to distribute the burden. First, God says, gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, and bring them unto the tent of meeting. Basically, Moses needs a team, people who already have standing and respect. Second, God promises a spiritual delegation. He says, I will come down and speak with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them. And third, the practical result. They shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone. Notice that God doesn't just give Moses new personal strength, he structurally changes the whole leadership dynamic, so Moses doesn't have to carry the mental and emotional weight of hundreds of thousands of people completely by himself. Then, in verses 18 through 20, God turns his attention back to the weeping people. And let me tell you, this is not a gentle blessing. This is a severe lesson. God tells Moses to tell the people, sanctify yourselves against tomorrow, and ye shall eat flesh, for ye have wept in the ears of the Lord. He says they're going to eat it not for 1 day or 2 days or 5 or 10 or 20. No, they are going to eat meat for a whole month. And then God uses this visceral, almost disturbing image. He says, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it. Why such a harsh provision? Well, God clearly states the reason. Because you have rejected the Lord who is among you and have wailed before him saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? You see, their complaint about food was actually a total fundamental rejection of their redemption and their Redeemer.
Now Moses, hearing this promise of meat for a whole month for hundreds of thousands of people, is just stunned. In verses 21 and 22, the analytical leader in Moses calculates the logistics and he seriously doubts it's even possible. He says, here I am among 600,000 men on foot, and you say I will give them meat to eat for a whole month? Would they have enough if flocks and herds were slaughtered for them? Would they have enough if all the fish in the sea were caught for them? It's this fascinating moment of pure logical doubt from a man who is incredibly accustomed to miracles. But God's response in verse 23 is swift, powerful, and definitive. He simply says, is the Lord's arm too short? You will now see whether or not what I say will come true for you.
Following this, in verses 24 through 29, Moses follows God's command and gathers the 70 elders around the tent. God comes down in the cloud, takes of the Spirit that was on Moses, and puts it on the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rests on them, they prophesy. But there's a fascinating little hiccup here. 2 men, Eldad and Medad, who were listed among the elders but had somehow remained back in the camp, suddenly begin prophesying right in the middle of the camp as the Spirit rests on them too. A young man runs to tell Moses. Joshua, who has been Moses' loyal assistant since his youth, is super alarmed. He says, Moses, my lord, stop them. Joshua is clearly jealous for Moses' authority, viewing this unsanctioned prophesying as a massive threat. But this brilliant moment illustrates Moses' incredible humility. He replies to Joshua, are you jealous for my sake? I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. It is literally the ultimate example of a secure leader who wants to empower others rather than protect his own ego. Moses doesn't want a monopoly on divine connection. He wants the entire people elevated.
Section 4. Quail, Plague, and Consequences. So Moses and the elders return to the camp, and we transition right into the climax of the chapter. God has established the leadership structure, and now he is about to fulfill his promise, or rather his threat, regarding the meat. We're about to see how getting exactly what you cry for can sometimes be the worst possible outcome. In verses 31 and 32, nature itself bends to God's command. A wind goes out from the Lord and drives quail in from the sea.
And the sheer volume described in the text is absolutely staggering. The quail are brought down all around the camp to a depth of about 2 cubits, which is roughly 3 feet above the ground. And this blanket of birds stretches as far as a day's walk in every single direction. The visual is just overwhelming, an absolute ocean of birds surrounding the Israelites, trapping them in the very flesh they had been weeping for.
And how do the people react to this? With unbridled gluttony. All that day, all that night, and all the next day, the people go out and gather quail. They don't just take what they need for a meal, no. The text notes that no one gathered less than 10 homers. To put that into perspective, 10 homers is an ancient measurement equivalent to roughly 60 bushels. That's a massive amount. They are hoarding unimaginable mountains of meat, spreading it out all around the camp. Their craving has completely overridden any sense of common sense or moderation. Then, the inevitable consequence arrives in verses 33 through 35. The text paints a really grim picture. While the meat was still between their teeth, and before it could be consumed, the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. The very thing they lusted after literally became the instrument of their punishment. Because of this massive loss of life driven by unholy desire, they named the place Kebroth Hata'ava. In Hebrew, this literally translates to graves of craving, because there they buried the people who had craved the food of Egypt. From this graveyard of gluttony, the surviving people journeyed onwards to Hazareth.
Section 5. Key Ideas and Life Lessons.
You know, the Torah doesn't just record history for the sake of giving us facts. It records it for our instruction. There are 3 highly practical, everyday lessons derived directly from the plain text here. First, the danger of constant complaining. The Israelites romanticized their painful past, remembering free garlic but totally forgetting the slavery, and they let it ruin their present miracles, the daily manna. We do this too, right? When we focus entirely on what we lack rather than the daily miracles sustaining us. Second, be careful what you wish for. The people demanded meat so aggressively that it actually became a punishment. Sometimes God's harshest discipline is simply giving us exactly what our unrestrained appetites demand. And third, the necessity of sharing leadership burdens. Even a prophet as great as Moses could not do it alone. Burnout is a very real thing, and God's solution was delegation, distributing the spirit and the responsibility among 70 capable elders. Trying to carry everyone's weight by yourself, it will break you. Section 6. Chapter Recap. Now, to perfectly solidify your understanding of the journey we just took, let's set up a final summary. We've covered a lot of emotional and physical ground in this single chapter, so let's slowly walk through this timeline. Step 1. It all started with general complaining resulting in the warning fire at Taberah. Step 2. The mixed multitude and the Israelites escalated the situation by weeping and craving the foods of Egypt, causing Moses to completely break down under the burden. Step 3. God intervened by establishing the 70 elders, taking the spirit from Moses to distribute the leadership weight. Step 4. God answered the craving by sending an overwhelming amount of quail, which the people gathered in absolute gluttony, triggering a devastating plague. And finally, Step 5. This all climaxed in the naming of Kebroth Hata'ava, the graves of craving, marking a really tragic end to those whose desires overrode their gratitude. As they journey onward to Hazeroth, it leaves us with a challenging question. What cravings are you allowing to blind you to the everyday miracles in your own life? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.